At 1:15 in the morning of June the 6th, 1944, British aircraft towing gliders arrived over the coast of northern France. Then the gliders were released and plunged down to capture vital bridges over the Caen Canal in eastern Normandy. The Allies had launched their great gamble to invade Hitler's empire in Western Europe. "50 miles to the west, US paratroops came down around the village of Saint-Mère-Église. There was a fierce firefight. But 3 hours later, the village was in US hands. One of the most crucial battles of World War II was underway. An hour later, horrified German sentries along the Normandy coast saw a vast armada appear out of the mist. They had had no warning. The Allied fleet had sailed under cover of darkness. Moreover, Allied countermeasures had confused the German radar into believing the main weight of the attack was approaching the French coast further east at the Pas-de-Calais. Allied warships off the Normandy coast now began pounding the German defensive positions. Wave after wave of aircraft swept overhead. Under cover of the bombardment, assault troops headed for the shore. But as they closed in, German artillery and machine guns opened fire. A number of the landing craft were hit. Others fell foul of underwater obstructions. But at 6:30 in the morning, the first waves of troops hit the beaches. At the far western end, the US 4th Infantry Division came ashore near at what they called Utah Beach. Within 2 hours, it was linking up with the US paratroopers who'd landed at Saint-Mère-Église. Next door, at Omaha Beach, it was more difficult. The beach was a defender's dream, with high cliffs and few ways inland. As the US 1st Infantry Division waded ashore, they were mown down by German machine guns. To make matters worse, the Americans' amphibious tanks were swamped. The troops were trapped on the beach. Disaster was looming. But finally, a few of the soldiers managed to scale the cliffs. Against all the odds, the Americans hung on to the beachhead. further east, in the center of the landing area, Britain's 50th Infantry Division came ashore at Gold Beach. They too met savage fire. But now, the British deployed their funnies. The troops were soon moving inland. At the adjoining landing spot, Juno Beach, the Canadian 3rd Infantry Division faced a similar situation. Here too, Britain's funnies were vital in helping the troops off the beach. Finally, on the far left flank, at Sword Beach, the British 3rd Infantry Division met only patchy resistance. Within hours, its commandos had linked up with the glider-borne troops at the Caen Canal. By early afternoon, the Allies had successfully established all of the beachheads. The timing of the invasion had caught the Germans completely by surprise. They'd expected the Allies to wait until the weather had cleared. Rommel, the operational German commander for the whole of the northwest French coast, had taken the opportunity of bad weather to visit his family in Germany. His immediate subordinate in Normandy and Brittany, General Friedrich Dollmann, was over 100 miles away, taking part in a war game exercise. Only the overall German commander for the whole of Western Europe, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, was at his HQ. But he needed Hitler's permission to move his panzer reserves to the battlefield. However, Hitler was asleep, and his aides wouldn't wake him. It wasn't until midday that the Führer finally learnt about the invasion, but he didn't take it seriously. He was still convinced the main attack would come in the Pas-de-Calais. Normandy, he believed, was just a feint. Finally, in the late afternoon, when the scale of the invasion was becoming all too clear, Hitler unleashed his reserves. But they were too far away to provide immediate support. Despite stubborn German resistance, the beachheads around Utah, Gold and Juno and Sword were secure. Only at Omaha was the situation more precarious. Here, German resistance had prevented the US troops moving more than a mile inland. By nightfall on June the 6th, over 100,000 Allied troops had been landed in Normandy. It had been an extraordinary feat of planning, ingenuity, and courage. The first day of the Allies' great gamble had paid off. But it was just the beginning. Now they had to build up, break out, and push on into Europe. As the second day dawned on greatest seaborne invasion ever attempted, thousands of Allied troops had broken out of their beachheads and were moving inland. But they found the Normandy countryside hard going. The patchwork of woodland and small fields provided ideal terrain for German tanks and machine guns. The Allies suffered heavy casualties. Allied air power provided crucial support. When von Rundstedt's panzer reinforcements arrived, they'd been so depleted by the air attacks that they were unable to mount a major counterattack. The German reinforcements were also hampered by French resistance fighters, operating behind German lines. They ambushed troop convoys and blew up bridges. As a result, the Das Reich SS Panzer Division took over 2 weeks to make a journey which should have lasted a mere 3 days. Its troops took out their fury on the French civilian population. The village of Oradour-sur-Glane and its 642 inhabitants were wiped out. After 4 days of fighting, all the Allied beachheads were finally able to link up. But they'd still only managed to penetrate 10 miles inland. Eventually, 6 days after the landing, the British commander General Montgomery launched a major assault on the strategically important town of Caen. The British 7th Armoured Division, the Desert Rats, advanced. But its spearhead ran into 4 German Tiger tanks. The Allies' Sherman tanks were completely outclassed. Their guns were outranged and their shells unable to penetrate the German armor. They were particularly vulnerable because many ran on petrol fuel and were liable to burst into flames when hit. The Germans nicknamed the Sherman the Ronson, after the cigarette lighter, or more macabrely, the Tommy Cooker. In less than 5 minutes, more than 10 British tanks were destroyed. The attack on Caen stalled. Outmatched by the German tanks, the Allies relied on air power and artillery. But it wasn't enough. The Desert Rats retreated. Caen remained in German hands. Meanwhile, further west, US forces advanced on the equally important port of Cherbourg. It would take them nearly 10 days to get close to it. They weren't helped by the weather. During the first week of the invasion, it had been relatively calm, and supplies and reinforcements had poured in through the Mulberry artificial harbours. But now the weather turned. Gales swept the English Channel. The US Mulberry Harbour at Omaha was destroyed. The other Mulberry, in the British sector, was badly damaged and put out of action for several days. The flow of reinforcements slowed. It meant the port of Cherbourg was an even more vital objective. As the US forces now approached it, the German garrison resisted. There was fierce house-to-house fighting. It would take the Allies a week to secure the city. But the port had been trashed by the fleeing Germans. It would take a further month before it could be brought back into service. Meanwhile, Montgomery launched another assault on Caen. But the storms had turned the fields into a sea of mud. Low cloud meant air support was impossible. To make matters worse, the newly arrived elite German 2nd SS Panzer Corps was thrown into the defense of the city. After 4 days, the British were again forced to halt. Then, as the clouds cleared, nearly 500 Allied bombers devastated Caen. British troops fought their way into the north suburbs. But the ruins made ideal defensive positions for the Germans. Allied casualties mounted. After 48 hours, the attack was, yet again, called off. Three weeks later, Montgomery tried for a fourth time. The plan was to capture the remaining German strongholds and then push on south, deeper into France. After 2 more days of fighting, the city was finally won. The way now seemed open for the British tanks to move south, deeper into France. But the Germans were waiting with a large force of panzers. The British advance stopped again.